Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show.
I have a delightful interview for you today, and her name is Abigail Teifenthaler. She's a wife, mom, consultant, and brand influencer. Her no-nonsense and practical approach helps business owners develop brand clarity and confidence so they can shift how they make decisions that impact their marketing, sales, and overall business. Her secret is focusing on branding fundamentals. While many marketers try so hard to disrupt the market, Abigail stresses relationship building and life cycle strategies to target her ideal clients with solutions that work for them. Before starting Sweetspot Strategies, Abigail ran a promotional products business that achieved a $1 million business year in year two. She used her branding and marketing expertise to create a simpler way of approaching business development and client management, which translated to a client roster that included a mix of both large and small clients. Some clients continue to work with her because she is always asking the right questions to make sure their ad specialties stand out. Welcome, Abigail. How are you?
I'm well, Gayle. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. This is delightful because we love to have our women over 50 who are still working and doing fantastic things, and you are. So this is fantastic for me to interview you. So let's ask you, how did you get into being an entrepreneur?
I always say I was thrust into it because I relocated from Pennsylvania to Florida, uprooted my family, my husband and two girls who were 2 and 5 at the time. And I was going to partner with two gentlemen, and we were going to sell $1 million programs to the McDonald's and Coca-Colas of the world. And 3 weeks into me moving, relocating down to Florida, one of the gentlemen went out on a bender and ended up in rehab. And the other gentleman was like, I didn't want this, and just literally canceled the entire partnership.
Best laid plans, right, Abigail? The things that you think are going to be fabulous, and then boom, something happens.
Well, and I was 37 at the time, and I started interviewing at ad agencies down in South Florida because my background was ad agencies, New York and Philadelphia. And I couldn't find a way to fit in there. They didn't know what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with them. And my parents were the region managers for a company called Herman Marketing, which at the time was the 3rd largest promotional products company in the world. And I was in their house while we were looking for a place to live. And so I was answering the phone, and I realized they worked with minimum $500,000 a year clients. And I said, I'm going to serve the underserved. That was my motto at the time. And so I started, just asking landscapers and pool guys and small business owners, where they were sourcing their shirts and their pens and some of the things they used in their business. And lo and behold, it grew into this incredible business. The end of first year, I made a profit. The second year, I did $1 million.
Well, but it just shows you, if you've got that entrepreneurial spunk, that's what happens. I mean, you just start doing something, and if you do it well, it grows and grows and grows. And that's what I like to have our listeners, know and understand is that, bad things can happen, horrible things can happen. But if you've got that drive and you've got that ambition and you really want to create something, you can do it. It might be something you never thought of, but it works. So what has been your greatest challenge, both personally and professionally, since you've been doing this?
Well, 2008 was not a kind year to me, and it created a whole bunch of drama in our family and our business. And I actually ended up $100,000 owned to 26 different suppliers. My bookkeeper got ill, and what I didn't know was that she wasn't paying our suppliers. And, you're only as good as your last job in this industry, just like most others. So I think the greatest challenge was really kind of being forced into facing the downside of a good business with bad decisions. It took 9 months to clear up 24 of the 26 suppliers. And I had to negotiate with every single one of them.
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple things that I always tell everybody. Number one, you can't neglect the marketing side of your company, no matter what business you're in, whether it's financial or whether it's real estate or whether it's retail, whatever it is, you're in the marketing business, because without that, you have nothing. The other thing you can't do is, and this is a terrible thing to say, but you can't really relinquish the finances to anybody else. If you don't keep your eye on the checkbook, you could be out of business tomorrow. And that's, of course, a lesson you learned the hard way. And it seems impossible that a bookkeeper that you're hiring to do the books, that's her only job, doesn't pay the bills. I mean, I'm sure that was like a shock to your nervous system. So, but then again, don't forget, 2008 was a terrible year for everybody.
Right.
So you weren't alone in the trenches at that particular point. So now you're back to being successful, and you're back to doing your thing, and you're still in the promotional business. Is that correct?
I do some. I really have been focusing on consulting for new distributors in the industry, but I still do source some items for clients when, they ask me. I don't go out and solicit business anymore.
So that's interesting. That's interesting that you're now doing consulting for people in that industry. Knowing many people in that industry, my question to you is, what are they asking for? Because most of the people who do that are really salespeople and not ones who necessarily want advice. So how do they find you, number one? And what do they ask you, number two?
Those are great questions. They find me online. I'm a member of a couple of the promotional products groups. I was a speaker at the big industry show. I did 2 breakout sessions last January, and I've spoken at some of the regional meetings for the PPAI organization. So I'm there. I've written articles for PBB magazine. So I'm showing up as an expert, and the type of questions they're asking me really, are great questions. Like, I don't need somebody to teach me how to, what's the difference between silk screening and embroidery. I need somebody who's going to help me understand, a follow-up system, who's going to help me understand how to better network, how to, even so far as what are some of the things I can do with my marketing to help. So it's about business processes and mindset and getting a better feel for themselves as entrepreneurs versus promotional products distributors.
That's interesting because we certainly know the world is changing, and I think it's changing a lot in the promotional products side of things, because what people want and what people give away today is so much different, and people are looking for the unusual. They're looking for something that nobody's doing anymore and not the same old, same old. So what excites you looking forward in your life?
In my life, what excites me looking forward? Well, it took me a number of years to embrace the technology concept because all of my business was built offline. And it excites me that we are stretching boundaries a little bit more. And as a strategist, and that's really what my profession is, because even selling promotional items, I always strategically looked at what did the client actually need and what made sense for their ideal client. I I like realizing that some of the fundamentals are still really required to be successful. We can't just hop to the next technology, not really understanding that it's still going to be engagement based. It's still going to be follow up based. It's still going to be, it doesn't matter how great the camera is if you don't know what to do after you've posted the picture of something.
Well, that is so true, because I was just reading an article this morning from a peer of mine, and what he was saying was that, you really can't depend on any one strategy, technologically today, because something else is going to come along that's better or faster or the same or whatever. And if those clients aren't faithful to you as you and your business, you're going to be out of luck. Because, for example, you may have 10,000 followers on Facebook, but they're not yours. And if Facebook changes something, they all go away. So you've got to really build your own list, your own clientele, and so forth. And so that makes a big difference as well. But what have you enjoyed, I guess, most, and I'd have to say least, about being a business owner? Because, I've always been a business owner. I have never, ever in my entire life worked for someone else. Even as a kid, I developed my own businesses. My first job was at 13 selling Avon cosmetics door to door.
Wow.
And so, and I was lucky. It was the days, Abigail, when people were home and they weren't working, and I knocked on people's doors. They let me in, and I was a tiny little thing, and I sat down on their couches, and boy, if they didn't buy, they never got rid of me. So the only way I would walk out the door was with an order. So there's a lot that goes into owning your own business. I just never, ever wanted to work for anybody. So what do you think is the best thing and the worst thing about being a business owner?
Well, the best thing, is I can go to work in my pajamas and nobody would ever know it. So it's, it's the casualness of having everything I need within a reach, a simple reach. And it's probably the worst thing as well to some degree, because for an introvert, I'm not an introvert, but if I was an introvert and didn't get out to do any offline networking, you might feel very much boxed into the 17-inch screen you're in front of every day. So I think for me, the best thing about being an entrepreneur is really what I've been able to provide to my family, over the I've been an entrepreneur now, I'm in my 22nd year. So I've been, I've raised 2 daughters. My husband has been able to change careers. And we've had the flexibility of traveling, on times of the year when maybe everybody else couldn't travel. So we've really been able to expose our children to, a lot of different things and make them comfortable, even if they choose at some point to become entrepreneurs. It won't be so foreign to us as a family, so we can support them. The worst thing about being an entrepreneur is, I think, probably kind of getting into your own way, getting stuck in your head without the right type of support system. That's super easy. If you don't have a support system in place that will tell you, it's okay, or this is, get off your butt and let's do, make some phone calls or do something, that can be the worst thing for some people.
Well, it's true. You talk about being casual. Luckily, you're working on a business that you work out of your house. There are business people, of course, who have a location, that they go to. But again, in today's world, you can really design your business the way you want it to be. And if you decide, even if you, are doing something other than what you do, you can always set up conferences in rented facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think, this is your 22nd year, what do you think has contributed to your success? What is it that has made, or let's set you apart from, because there's a lot of people in the promotional products industry. There's a lot of people out there selling, so we say, items of some sort. So what has made you unique and what has made you different?
I think having a background in branding and advertising helps because I really do understand the right type of questions. I've never gone into a company, and I've worked with companies like American Express and Alamo and Wyeth Erst and, Nova Southeastern University. I've worked with very big companies. I've never gone in and asked for business. I've always gone in and asked to for a seat at the table. And I think that's been, a somewhat novel approach because, as you said, this is a very competitive industry. And there's a lot of people out there who just, walk up and down the streets and drop off catalogs and say, I can get your pens for you cheaper than whoever you're using. But there aren't as many of us who will take the time to build the relationship, to get to know what the client needs, to show up as a problem solver right from the beginning, and to follow up. Plain and simple, follow up is 80% of the game.
Well, yeah, there's no question about that because, buyers' wants and needs and instincts change all the time. And if you're not in touch, you don't know what that is, and you don't know what emergencies they might have, or just by you being in touch with them, something will trigger in their head. And it's funny that you mentioned Nova Southeastern because I serve on their ambassadors board, and so I'm very active with them. So, in fact, I think I spent more time in running up to Fort Lauderdale in this month of December than ever. I mean, there were so many celebrations and meetings and different things. So that's interesting that you were working with them. But you're right. I mean, it's an interesting thing that when you give anything your personal touch, it makes such a big difference. And so that's probably something that a lot of people don't realize. They just think, well, gee, I've got this client and I'm going to have them forever. But that's not so. I mean, somebody else can sneak in there so easily. But you went from selling promotional items to consulting
right.
In brand strategy and positioning. What made you make that switch?
It's a little bit of a funny story, and my girlfriend laughs every time she thinks of it because I said, at one point, like when I decided to close my promotional products business, one of my friends sat down and said, okay, what are you going to do? And I said, I really think I'm going to focus on working with small business owners and helping them with branding strategy, because I think it's such a critical and fundamental part of, building and scaling a business. And she goes, well, why don't you talk to distributors? And I go, I don't want to. I'm angry at the industry, And I mean, I was so frustrated after 2008 and 9 and 10 for no reason other than the stress I placed on myself. The industry didn't do me wrong. It just was one of those instinctual moments where I just said I was done. And I decided that consulting, there are so many small business owners, particularly women, Gayle, and particularly women who are over 40, 50 years of age, who are trying to take their 30 and 40 years of expertise and, whether they're doing it offline or online doesn't even matter, but they're brilliant, brilliant women. And they can't see that next step because they might have spent 30 years in corporate America and they might have been at the head of manufacturing for a big company or the head of finance or the head of marketing even. But you see, in corporate America, you do one thing and one thing only. And so I liken entrepreneurship, solopreneurship to being, a wife and a mother. We're budgeting, we're shopping, so we're negotiating at the grocery store. We're negotiating with our kids to get their homework done and, get themselves, ready for school in the morning. And what we forget is we walk out of a corporate position and then we think we're going to be able to apply a lot of those, what we did in corporate to our own businesses. And we're doing it all. So we have to learn it all.
Well, that's true. I mean, I can't tell you, Abigail, I think I was in business a long time before I had to be in business at least 15 years, maybe even more, before I realized that companies paid for things. Since I had always paid for everything myself, I didn't know anything about, oh, if you go to a conference, your company pays for it. Or
Right.
if if you take this training program, the company pays for it. It just never, ever even occurred to me. So I didn't worry about the benefits so much, or the paid vacations or things like that. But just so many things that are a part of corporate America that I just was not knowledgeable about. And
Well,
so that was really a shock to my system.
yeah, and I'll tell you, so imagine somebody who's spent most of their career at one big or even small company or another. And I always say, even to take the money conversation, the accountant, allocates the money, but they don't make it and they don't spend it, right? They're keeping track of
Right,
it.
right.
Salespeople make the money, but they don't spend it or keep track of it. Marketing people spend it, but they don't make it and they don't keep track of it. So here's three big disciplines within a corporate environment that you're now responsible for all of them as
Well,
an
that's
entrepreneur.
true. That's so true. You're right. And the other part of it is a lot of people, although certainly there are less people on staff now, still people who have had a really good, sizable position, the ones you are describing, they've had assistants, they've had people who have done things for them, and now they're doing everything, as you said, themselves. And that's a hard thing to rationalize and to, oh my gosh, I've got to empty the trash, and I've got to order the supplies, and I've got to make sure, all of those things that nobody even thinks about, but it's a part of, is this going to work? And the whole point is, do you have a good tracking system? Do you have a good follow-up system? Do you know what you need when? I mean, are you able to budget what you have coming in so it's going to last you to the end of the month? That old saying of there's more months at the end than money, So
Yep.
all of those things are a part of who you are and what's going on and so forth. So it's so true. I mean, there's a lot of things that people have to learn. On the other hand, I will say that the people that I know that come out of corporate America who are sharp, they sure have a lot more skills than I do in a lot of arenas, because they've had to kind of deal with the big boys, so to speak, and
Right.
they've had to learn. They've had to learn certain things. Sometimes I think my naivete helps me, and at other points I think it's a stumbling block. So I guess it's the best. So we just have a couple minutes before we end our first part of this. Is there anything that you want to add before we take our break? Something that you might want to add to what we've already talked about?
Uh, I will tell you that as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's really enjoyed this part of my life journey, I want other women to be able to embrace it and use it for good in their own life, as opposed to frustration. So I think community, and one of the things you're providing, Gayle, is a forum for them to understand that they can give themselves permission to learn and accept what they don't know, and to also feel okay when things aren't going 100%, because very rarely do they ever do, for an extended period of time. There's always a hiccup. So
that's true. And the interesting thing is that when you look at this business of, oh my gosh, I reached 50 and what else is there for me? Wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff for you. And so I think this is the best time in the world for women who maybe not have worked before, but have that entrepreneurial gene, want to do something, because they've learned a lot in raising a family and balancing a budget as a homemaker, and solving issues between not only their kids, but possibly, if they participated in things like the PTA. I mean, that's all a part of learning and developing your skills.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
there are a lot of, there's so many things that can be done. Well, hold on, folks. We're coming back with Abigail, and We'll be back in just a second or two, and stay tuned.